The tip of the blade pressed against the silk of her dress, right between her shoulder blades. "Do not move," a voice whispered from the shadows, "or I will ruin your gown, and then I will ruin you." Isabella froze. Her hand was hovering over the open map case on the Duke's desk. The moonlight streaming through the library window illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, but it did not illuminate the man holding the sword. It didn't have to. She knew his voice. Lord Julian Blackwood, the Duke of Sussex, the man known in the French courts as Le Loup, the wolf. He was supposed to be in Parliament debating the grain tax. He was not supposed to be standing behind her in his own library at 2 a.m. Isabella took a breath. She calculated her odds. She had a dagger in her garter. She had a vial of blinding powder in her ring, but the sword was already touching her skin. "You are early, Your Grace," Isabella said calmly, not turning around. "The debate must have been boring." "It was," Julian murmured. "I find treason much more stimulating. Step away from the desk, mademoiselle, slowly." Isabella raised her hands. She stepped back. She turned slowly to face him. Julian was wearing a black riding coat wet with rain. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His grey eyes were cold, hard, and devoid of mercy. He looked at her, the woman he had danced with 3 nights ago, the woman he had flirted with over champagne and saw only a target. "Who are you?" he asked. "And do not tell me you are the Comtesse de Valois. The real Comtesse is 60 years old and currently in bed with gout." Isabella smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "I am whoever you need me to be, Julian." Julian didn't smile back. He flicked his wrist. The sword tip moved to her throat. "You are a spy," he said. "You are French, and you are stealing the coastal defence plans for the southern ports." "I was merely borrowing them," Isabella corrected. "Napoleon has an interest in architecture." Julian laughed, a harsh, humourless sound. "Napoleon has an interest in invasion, and you, my dear, have an interest in breathing, which is unfortunate because the penalty for espionage is hanging." He reached into his pocket with his free hand and pulled out a length of rope. "Turn around," he ordered. "Hands behind your back." Isabella hesitated. She looked at the rope. She looked at the window. It was a 20-foot drop to the rose garden. "I wouldn't jump," Julian warned, reading her mind. "My guards are in the garden. They have orders to shoot anything that moves, even beautiful French spies." Isabella sighed. She turned around. She felt the rough hemp tighten around her wrists. He tied her efficiently with a sailor's knot. He marched her out of the library, down the back stairs and into the cellar. He opened a heavy iron door. "The wine cellar?" Isabella asked, raising an eyebrow. "I prefer a dry red if you have it." Inside there was a small windowless room used for storing ice. It was cold. There was a single chair. "Sit," Julian commanded. Isabella sat. The cold seeped through her thin silk dress instantly. Julian lit a lantern. He placed it on a barrel. He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. He studied her. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why what? Why you? You are skilled. You picked the lock on my desk without a scratch. You moved through the house without waking the dogs. You are an elite agent. Why send an elite to steal maps that are 3 years old?" Isabella blinked. 3 years old? Julian smirked. "Did you think I would keep the real defence plans in my library? Those are decoys, darling. The real plans are in the Tower of London, under guard." Isabella felt a flush of anger. She had been played. "So I risked my neck for scrap paper," she hissed. "You risked your neck because you are arrogant," Julian said. "You thought the English Duke was just a drunk fool who liked pretty faces. You thought you could charm me, drug my wine, and walk out with the keys to the kingdom. He stepped closer. He loomed over her. But I knew, he whispered. I knew from the moment you walked into the ballroom. You don't dance like a comtesse. You dance like a fencer. Your balance is too perfect. Isabella looked at him. She saw the intelligence in his eyes. She realized that the drunk fool act was just as much a mask as her comtesse persona. Game recognizes game, she said softly. Indeed. Julian pulled a dagger from his belt. He tested the edge with his thumb. So now we have a problem, he said. I should hang you. It is my duty. The king would give me a medal. But, Isabella asked, sensing an opening. But hanging you seems like a waste, Julian admitted. You are talented, you are beautiful, and you are clearly desperate. France doesn't pay its spies well, does it? Your dress is silk, but your shoes have been resoled 3 times. Isabella curled her toes in her boots. He noticed everything. What do you want, Julian? I have a job, he said. A job that requires a thief, a liar, someone who can wear a mask and not blink when a gun is pointed at her head. Isabella narrowed her eyes. You want me to double-cross? You want me to spy on Napoleon? No, Julian said. That is boring. He leaned in close. The lantern light flickered on his face, casting deep shadows. I want you to help me steal the crown jewels. The silence in the ice room was absolute. Isabella stared at him. She laughed. You are mad, she said. You are the Duke of Sussex. You are a peer of the realm. Why would you want to steal the crown jewels? Because they are fake, Julian said. Isabella stopped laughing. What? The jewels in the tower, Julian said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The ones the public sees. They are paste, glass. The real jewels, the historic stones, were sold by the king's father 20 years ago to pay off his war debts. He replaced them with replicas. And next week is the Jubilee, Julian said. The king is going to wear the crown. He is going to hold the sceptre. Experts from all over Europe are coming. Jewellers, historians. If they see the glass, if they realise the monarchy is bankrupt, the government will fall, the banks will collapse, England will be ruined. So you want to steal them, to hide the fact that they are already stolen? Isabella asked, trying to wrap her head around the lunacy. Precisely, Julian said. If the jewels are stolen by a master thief before the Jubilee, no one will examine them. The king becomes a victim, not a fraud. The insurance pays out, the economy is saved, and the secret remains safe. Isabella looked at him. It was brilliant. It was insane. It was the kind of job that made her blood sing. And why do you need me? She asked. You seem capable. I cannot break into the tower alone, Julian said. I need a distraction. I need someone who can scale the White Tower while I disable the guards. I need a partner, Isabella. And what do I get, besides not hanging? Julian smiled. You get the jewels, he said. Isabella's breath hitched. The replicas? They are high-quality replicas, Julian said. Gold settings, Austrian crystal, worth perhaps £50,000 on the black market. You take them. You flee to America. You live like a queen, and you? I get to save my country, Julian said, and I get the pleasure of knowing I outsmarted everyone. Isabella looked at the rope on her wrists. She looked at the Duke. If I say no. Then I call the guards, Julian said simply, and you hang at dawn. Isabella weighed the options. Death. Or the greatest heist in history, followed by a fortune and freedom. Untie me, she said. Julian didn't hesitate. He cut the ropes. He held out his hand. Partners? Isabella rubbed her wrists. She looked at his hand. It was a strong hand, a dangerous hand. Partners, she said, taking it. But if you double-cross me, Julian, I will kill you. I would expect nothing less, he smiled. The next week was a blur of preparation. They moved to Julian's London townhouse. They turned the attic into a workshop. They studied blueprints of the Tower of London. They timed the guard rotations. Isabella was amazed by him. Julian wasn't just a strategist, he was a craftsman. He built grappling hooks, he forged keys, he mixed sleeping draughts for the guards, and Julian was amazed by her. She could climb a sheer brick wall in seconds. She could pick a pocket while looking a man in the eye. She moved with a fluid, deadly grace that made his heart race. They worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. The tension between them shifted. It wasn't just professional anymore, it was charged. One night they were arguing over the exit strategy. "We go out through the sewers," Julian insisted, pointing at the map. "It is the only way." "It is filthy," Isabella argued, "and loud. We go over the roof. We use the zip line. It's too visible. The moon is full. It's fast," Isabella shouted. "Speed is life, Julian." She slammed her hand on the table. Julian grabbed her wrist. "Listen to me," he growled. "I am not losing you to a lucky shot from a sentry. We go the safe way." Isabella froze. "Losing me?" Julian looked at her. His face was inches from hers. The map lay forgotten between them. He realized what he had said. He realized that the thought of her falling, of her being caught, terrified him more than the collapse of the British Empire. "You are an asset," he stammered, pulling back. "I cannot afford to lose the asset." Isabella looked at him. Her eyes softened. "The sewers," she whispered. "Fine, we use the sewers." "Good," Julian said, turning away quickly. "Good." He poured himself a drink, his hand shaking. He was falling in love with a French spy, a woman he was supposed to send away forever in 3 days. The night of the heist arrived. It was raining. A heavy, cold London rain that cleared the streets and dampened the sound of footsteps. They dressed in black. Julian wore a mask. Isabella wore a tight-fitting suit that allowed her to move. They approached the tower from the river. They rowed a small boat to the Traitor's Gate. "Ready?" Julian whispered. "Always," Isabella said. They climbed the wet stone walls. Isabella went first, securing the ropes. Julian followed. They slipped past the outer guards like shadows. They reached the jewel house. "This is it," Julian whispered. 2 guards at the door. "I'll take the left," Isabella signalled. They moved. It was over in seconds. Isabella dropped from the ceiling, choking out the left guard. Julian struck the right guard with a sap. They dragged the bodies into the shadows. Julian picked the lock. The heavy iron door creaked open. Inside, the crown jewels sat on a velvet podium, encased in a glass cage. The crown, the sceptre, the orb. They glittered in the lantern light. They looked magnificent. Isabella approached the glass. She used a diamond-tipped cutter to slice a circle in the pane. She reached in. She lifted the crown. It was heavy. She frowned. "Julian," she whispered. "What?" Julian was watching the door, pistol drawn. Isabella held up the crown. She tapped the central ruby with her fingernail. It didn't sound like glass. It sounded like stone. She took out her loupe, a jeweller's magnifying glass she carried. She inspected the ruby. She saw the flaw, the tiny microscopic inclusion that only a natural ruby has. She looked at the gold. She bit it. It was soft. "Julian," she said, her voice trembling, "this isn't paste." Julian turned. "What?" "This is real," Isabella said. "This is the Black Prince's ruby. This is real gold." Julian walked over. He stared at the crown. "Impossible," he muttered. "My father. He told me. He showed me the ledger. He sold them. Isabella looked at the other items, the sceptre, the orb. They were all real. Your father lied, Isabella whispered, or he bought them back. Julian looked at the jewels. He looked at Isabella. If they are real, he said slowly, then we are not stealing fakes. We are stealing the actual crown jewels of England. The gravity of the crime crashed down on them. Stealing fakes to save the king's reputation was one thing. Stealing the real jewels, that was high treason. That was death. We have to put them back, Julian said. We can't take them. If we put them back, Isabella said, looking at the door, we have broken in for nothing, and the guards will wake up. Suddenly a bell rang, a loud clanging alarm bell. They froze. We didn't trip an alarm, Isabella said. We didn't, Julian realised. Someone else did. The door to the jewel house slammed shut. The bolt slid home. A heavy iron grate dropped over the entrance. Trapped. A small viewing slot in the door slid open. A face appeared. It was Lord Kensington, the King's treasurer, a man Julian had known since childhood, a man Julian trusted. Kensington smiled. Good evening, Julian, Kensington said. I see you found the bait. Kensington, Julian gasped. What is this? This, Kensington said, is the trap. I knew your father sold the jewels, Julian. I helped him do it. We made a fortune. Julian stared. But they are real. We checked them. Kensington laughed. Oh, they are real now. We bought them back last week. The market was favourable. But here is the problem, Julian. The audit is coming, and the money we used to buy them back, it came from the naval treasury. We embezzled it. Julian went pale. You stole from the navy? We borrowed it, Kensington corrected, but we can't put it back. So we need a scapegoat. We need a theft. A daring heist by a notorious French spy and a disgraced duke. He looked at Isabella. Thank you, mademoiselle. Your reputation made this very believable. You are going to kill us? Isabella asked, her hand going to her dagger. Oh, no, Kensington said. I am going to let the guards kill you. They are on their way. I told them I heard intruders. You will be found with the jewels in your hands, shot while trying to escape. A tragedy, but the crown will be safe, and the missing naval funds blamed on the chaos of the theft. He slid the slot shut. Footsteps, heavy boots running down the stone corridor, dozens of them. Julian looked at Isabella. We are dead, he said. Isabella looked at the cage. She looked at the jewels. She looked at the vent in the ceiling. It was small, too small for a man, but maybe. Boost me, she ordered. What? Boost me. Julian cupped his hands. Isabella stepped into them. He threw her up. She grabbed the iron grate of the vent. She pulled it open. She scrambled inside. Come on! She reached a hand down. I can't fit, Julian said. Look at the size of it. Isabella looked. He was right. His shoulders were too broad. Go! Julian shouted. Crawl! Get out! I am not leaving you. You have to. Julian drew his pistol. There is no point in both of us dying. Go, Isabella, live! The guards were at the door. They were hammering on it. Open up, in the king's name! Isabella looked at him. She looked at the man she had planned to rob, who was now sacrificing himself for her. I will come back for you, she vowed. Go! She crawled into the darkness of the vent. She scrambled through the dust and cobwebs. She heard the door below burst open. She heard gunfire. Bang! Bang! Then silence. Isabella bit her hand to stop from screaming. She kept crawling. She emerged onto the roof of the White Tower. The rain was lashing down. She was free, but Julian was gone. She stood on the roof, looking down at the river. She could flee. She could take the boat. She could disappear into Europe. She touched her chest. Her heart was beating a frantic rhythm. Julian, Julian, Julian. She couldn't leave him. She looked at the drain pipe. It ran down the side of the tower, past the window of the jewel house. She took a breath. She wasn't a spy anymore. She wasn't a thief. She was a partner. She slid down the drain pipe. She swung into the open window of the guardroom next to the jewel house. She landed silently. She crept to the door. She looked into the hallway. The guards were there. They had Julian. He wasn't dead. He was on his knees, bleeding from a head wound, surrounded by 10 soldiers. Kensington was standing over him, holding the crown. "Take him to the dungeon," Kensington ordered. "We will hang him in the morning. A public execution is better press." They dragged Julian away. Isabella waited. She followed them. She shadowed them down the spiral stairs into the bowels of the fortress. They threw Julian into a cell. They locked the heavy wooden door. 2 guards were posted outside. Isabella waited until Kensington left. She stepped out of the shadows. "Hey," she whispered. The guards turned. Isabella didn't fight fair. She threw a handful of the blinding powder she had kept in her ring. The guards screamed, clutching their eyes. Isabella moved. 2 swift kicks. They dropped. She grabbed the keys from the belt of the first guard. She unlocked the cell. Julian was lying on the cot. He looked up, dazed. "Isabella," he rasped, You came back?" "I forgot my cut," she said, smiling through her tears. She pulled him up. "Can you walk?" "I can run," he grunted. They ran. They didn't go back to the roof. They went down. To the sewers. "I hate the sewers," Isabella complained as they waded through the muck. "I told you it was the only way," Julian managed a weak laugh. They emerged at the riverbank, miles downstream, just as the sun was rising. They were covered in filth, exhausted and bruised. They collapsed on the grass. "You saved me," Julian whispered, holding her hand. "We are even," Isabella said. They looked at the city waking up. They were fugitives. Kensington would hunt them. "Where do we go?" Julian asked. "I cannot go back to my house. I am a traitor now." Isabella reached into her bodice. She pulled out something wrapped in a piece of velvet. It wasn't the crown. It was the scepter's diamond, the great star of Africa. "I managed to pry one loose before I went into the vent," she said casually. Julian stared at the diamond. It was the size of a walnut. "Isabella, that is worth enough to buy a vineyard in Italy?" she asked. Julian smiled. He kissed her, oblivious to the sewer smell. "Yes, a very large vineyard." "And Kensington?" "Let him explain to the king why the sceptre has a hole in it," Julian said. They vanished. Lord Kensington was eventually exposed when the naval embezzlement scandal broke. He died in prison. The Duke of Sussex was declared missing, presumed drowned. But years later, a British traveller in Tuscany wrote a letter home. He described a beautiful estate run by a couple who seemed deeply in love. The man had a limp, and the woman had a French accent. They made the best wine in the region, and the name of the vineyard, The Wolf and the Spy. It's a story about trust. True trust isn't forged when things are going well. It's forged when you are standing over a glass case, realizing everything you believed is a lie, and the only person you can rely on is the one holding a knife to your back. Julian and Isabella found freedom because they stopped playing the game of nations and started playing for each other. So, here is the question. If you found out your partner was a spy sent to rob you, but they came back to save you from a dungeon, would you run away with them or would you turn them in? I know what I'd do. I'd take the diamond and run. If you enjoyed this heist of the heart, steal that like button. And if you want to join our crew for the next job, hit subscribe. We are always planning the next big score. Until next time, keep your mask on and your powder dry.